New Thought Media Network proudly presents a weekly exploration of various spiritual practices with renowned spiritual authors, coaches, teachers, and Dr. Tracy Brown, RScP.
And now, here's Tracy.
Hey everybody, welcome to Poetry, Prayer, and Practice. Wow. It's so interesting that we are in the holiday season, in the season of high holy days, in the season of holidays like DAZE for so many people. And there's been so much going on in the world and in the lives of so many people I know that it just feels like this would be the perfect time to slow down a little bit, to remember what the holidays are all about, and to integrate both some teaching and some spiritual practice. So today, instead of having a guest, today I'm going to just invite you to connect in with my energy and to also just do some reflection related to especially Christmas, but all of the holidays that are happening this time of year, from Hanukkah to Bodhi Day to the Advent season. Of course, we have the winter solstice this week and Christmas next week. Kwanzaa for the week between Christmas and New Year's Eve, New Year's Day. And we could add Epiphany, or we could add the Lady of Guadalupe Day. And so there's a lot. And what I notice is a similarity between almost all of them is that there is this coming to or bringing forth the light. And in those examples where the light is not specifically referred to, enlightenment is, which is also bringing the light from within into the way that you live your life. So that's where we're going today. And I have a candle already lit that I lit right before we went live so that it would be right here in front of me, reminding me of the focus on the light. And there may be a couple of times where I hold it up to remind you as well that we are focusing on bringing the light and being the light. A few decades ago, I stopped celebrating Christmas. And a lot of people thought I was really strange. And what I found strange was that they couldn't understand why it felt hypocritical to me to be saying that I was celebrating the birth of Jesus and behaving in a lot of ways that the culture was saying was important, but it was inconsistent with my understanding of beliefs and standards. And I don't want to, and I've never encouraged other people to stop celebrating Christmas, because I think there's so much related to Christmas that really is about family and culture and sharing time with friends and all of that can be really, really good for all involved. So I don't expect people to do what I do, but there is a piece that I like to share, and it's the title of today's show, Rebirthing Christ Consciousness. And what does that mean? So I'm not going to actually do the process with you, but I do have a process in several different formats. There's the 90-minute process, there's the 12-hour process, there's the 24-hour process, and there is a 3-hour process in there as well. But they all fall under this banner of rebirthing Christ consciousness, especially related to Christmas. Rebirthing that consciousness that Jesus represented. And for those of us in New Thought, we tend to recognize that Jesus was not an exception, Jesus was an example. And so the consciousness that guided him in his life is the exact same consciousness that can guide each one of us. So one of the Ernest Holmes quotes that I love and try to remember this time of year is that Christ does not mean Jesus. Jesus embodied the Christ. So every December, when we are talking about and thinking about and committing to the nativity scene or the birth of the Christ child or the birth of Jesus, what we're really saying is this is a time to recognize and to recommit to the birth of that consciousness within me and within all of humanity. And so Christ does not mean Jesus. Jesus embodied the Christ is something that I try to remember. I also love the quote from Dr. Master in A Theocentric Way of Life. When one has truly awakened to God's presence within, one is no longer impressed by anyone claiming to be Jesus, but by having awakened to Christ consciousness within oneself, one may share the emerging wisdom without any claims to be Jesus or anyone else in the history of religion that people would tend to look up to. Do you just love that? That reminder that the God's presence is actually within each one of us and that we don't have to claim anything different from that. Yeah, that is very, very cool. So those two quotes I really, really love. And in the context of us thinking about this today, again, thinking about the light, being the light, and believing in the light, and being enlightened in the way that you go into the world. So I'm going to invite you to simply take a breath and follow with your breath the sound of this chime and then the sound of my voice. Breathing this in, I remember and recall that this is a season that many people gravitate toward for many different reasons. The joy, the celebration, the time with family, the holiness of the season, and the meaning of each holiday or holy day that is celebrated. Christmas is defined in the dictionary as the annual Christian festival celebrating Christ's birth. And for those who believe that the consciousness of the Christ is born within each human soul, believe then that Christmas becomes an opportunity to celebrate the birth of that consciousness within ourselves and within all humanity. Let that be the energy, and let that be the thought, and let that be the knowing that guides us in this moment and in every moment to move forward through this season, grounded in love, grounded in peace. Amen. And so it is. My goal today is for you to be thinking about how you know the Christ consciousness within you. And during the coming days, whether it is with the winter solstice, the longest night of the year that then begins moving into the light, or whether that is Christmas, or whether that is thinking about Hanukkah and the oil that burned so much longer, providing light than was humanly understood to be possible. The light. Think of the Christ consciousness within you as the light. I can light this candle, and it's a physical representation of lighting the light, looking into the light, holding the light, being grateful for the light. I can do the same thing for the light that is my soul, the light that is deep within me. So we come together to really to recommit to that light, to welcome that light, to recognize that light, to know and be the light in the world. And when we know that, then it becomes important to practice helping others light their light, or at least creating environments where they can light their light. So let's look at another quote, because these are the quotes that do guide me in my practice of thinking about this. And so this quote is also from Dr. Master. Therefore, in an absolute or ultimate reality, you and everyone else, although most would not have the least awareness of it, are God. You and everyone else are God. You and everyone else are a unique expression of God. And when you really get that, then the idea of rebirthing the Christ consciousness that is who you are at the very core becomes less challenging. You just have to remember to do it. Jesus, the man, became Christ. Jesus, the man, became Christ. The idea of God's sonship. Not only begotten Son of God, but the Son begotten of the only God. Not the only begotten Son of God, but the Son begotten of the only God. Ernest Holmes wrote that in Love and Law. And when we really get underneath it, it's easier to take it in and to remember that I am the son, the child, the offspring, the expression of this one God. And so are you, and so is everyone else. So that opens the door to be able to look within. And the question that I invite you to think about is, are you embodying that? Are you living it? Are you living that belief that you know you are the child or the offspring or the reflection and expression of that one pure infinite source. Now, many of us grew up hearing the creation story, not the creation story, I'm sorry, the birth of Jesus story around this time of year. And often I will reread that during this time of year. And the last few years, I've been reading the version of it that has been created from, or that has been written in the First Nations version of the New Testament. And it's the First Nations version, an indigenous translation of the New Testament. So I'm going to share it with you so that you can be thinking about how does this invite you to consider or to think about the nativity story or the birth of Jesus story. Birth of the chosen one. Birth of the chosen one. Here is the story of how the chosen one was born. His mother, Bitter Tears, or Mary, had been promised in marriage to He Gives Sons, Joseph. But before they came together in marriage, while still a virgin, she found out that she was carrying a baby in her womb from the Holy Spirit. He Gives Sons, Joseph, was a man of honor. He did not want to bring her trouble and open shame, so he thought about secretly releasing her from the marriage promise. As he wondered about these things, a messenger from the Great Spirit appeared to him in a dream and said, He gives sons, Joseph, descendant of much loved one, David. Do not be afraid to take Bitter Tears, Mary, as your wife, because the Holy Spirit has given her this child. She will give birth to a son. You will name him Creator, or Jesus. You will name him Creator Sets Free, Jesus, because he will set his people free from their bad hearts and broken ways. This gave full meaning to the words of Creator spoken long ago by the prophet. A young virgin will be with child and give birth to a son. They will call his name Emmanuel, which in our tribal language means Creator is with us. When he gives sons, Joseph woke up. He followed the guidance given him in the dream and took Bitter Tears, Mary, to be his wife. But he did not have sexual relations with her until after the child was born, and he named the child Creator Sets Free, or Jesus. And one of the reasons I love this version is with it being the indigenous version, changing the names also has a message and slows down the automatic mental assumption of, what's happening and what's going to happen. And also I love it because there are some subtle differences as you go on through the birth, and all of the same characters in the story, in the traditional Christian story, show up. But having the names reflect a different or a more complete expression of the person and the role they play in this transformation is very powerful. So, introducing you to that, I just want to introduce you to that so you can be reflecting on how are you welcoming this creator that sets free to be alive in you, to be alive through you in your words and in your actions. What is in your heart? And this is a quote from Reverend Deborah L. Johnson in the book Sacred Yes. And God says, I am always standing ready. I am available. That is to say, I am accessible. You have my full attention, and all of this is my deep intention. However, are you available to me? Is your heart a storage bin for the hurts and pains of the past? Is your heart a quicksand in which your feet become continuously cemented? Is your heart the place where you generate all of your worries and your fears and your anxieties? Is your heart the place where you enact dramatizations of polarization? Or is your heart fertile ground for the seeds of promise? Is your heart a hearth, the cozy fireplace that makes everyone feel at home? Is your heart bubbling over with love and goodwill? Is your heart a safe place to explore the hurts and pains of the past so the light of truth can dissipate the darkness? Is your heart a place of trust and faith and truth? A place of reconciliation and forgiveness? Is your heart fertile soil for the seeds of righteousness? What has been the primary content of your heart this year? What is the primary content of the heart right now? This is what I invite you to consider during this season of holidays, because it is a time where we're getting ready for renewal. So think about your words and actions and what you've been harboring in your heart, where you have been placing your heart's attention. This is the work that we do. This is the work that we do individually. This is the work that we do together in order to move forward, in order to rebirth the Christ consciousness. So when I think about rebirthing the Christ consciousness, it's not hard work. It's just remembering to do it. It's remembering to recognize the innate connection that you have with the creator of all life, to recognize it, to accept it, and to allow it to lead how you show up. So this whole idea of rebirthing the Christ consciousness and rebirthing light, rebirthing enlightenment can be done in so many different ways. You can extend your spiritual practice, whatever your normal spiritual practice is. Extend it and specifically focus in on, how am I the light of the world? How am I being the light of the world? Reflect each day on how you have been in relationship with other people. What are you saying? What are you doing? Can people, just by their interactions with you, feel better, feel seen, feel valued, feel heard? Yes, I hope, is your answer. If your answer is some yes, some no, then our practice becomes, can I go from 50-50 to 60-40, 70-30, 80-20? How can I discipline myself to be the light in the room, the light in the store, the light in the conversation? And while I do this work throughout the year, but especially during this season of holy days, I find that even though I'm pretty conscious about it, I can catch myself. I can even say today I was in a conversation with someone for an hour, and probably 35 minutes of that hour was venting from both of us about someone who is difficult to engage with. And I will say that after about 15 minutes, something went off within me of, what are you doing? What are you doing? Where is your heart? Not that I have to say well, I do love this person, but not that I have to say I like being around this person, or everything they do is perfect, or, oh, they are a perfect child of God, and they don't bother me. They are a perfect child of God, and our beliefs and our practices and our cultures, and there's a lot of differences that rub up against each other. But in the rebirthing the Christ within, rebirthing the Christ consciousness, stepping into the enlightenment, what I found myself thinking and then saying was, really, about 3 years ago, I accepted that this person is who he is, and he is not going to change. And so, why am I putting my energy into complaining about him? Because I see who he is, and he likes who he is. So, my job is to bless him and to manage my interactions with him in a way that are not about conflict, not about anger, not about fear, not about resentment. But in the time I have to be in his presence for some reason, to be fully me, because he's being fully him. And the Christ consciousness within me allows him to be fully him, and know that we're just two very different people. We don't have to agree. We don't have to see or experience the world in the same way. And then it starts being interesting to me instead of challenging for me. Now, we may not be able to do that with everyone, but that's what happened to me just earlier today. That, wait, whoa, wait a minute. If the Christ consciousness is guiding my every word, my choices, my actions, my decisions, then I can decide not to be around that person as much maybe as I was 5 years ago. I can decide that when I am in that person's presence, that I am behaving in a certain way because they're a child of God as well. So let me give the standard caveat here. Even as I'm using that example, there may be someone listening to me who is in a physically dangerous situation. So I am not saying put yourself in the way of physical harm, or really emotional harm either. So there are times when we do have to distance ourselves or move certain people out of our lives completely. And that is possible to do even from a place of Christ consciousness, because I can accept that you are who you are and choose not to be in your presence because it's not healthy or because it's dangerous for my well-being or it's dangerous for other people around me. So you can make that choice as long as you're not making that choice from a place of I'm going to get revenge or from a place of resentment or from a place of anger. You can make those choices from a place of grounded, centered consciousness. And that it's a whole different experience. So what I'm talking about is, being around people who maybe it is challenging, but because you recognize who they are and you are willing to let them be who they are without having them change to be just like you will find some common ground to stand on. So rebirthing the Christ consciousness, which is what we're focusing on today, because we are right in the middle of the busiest holiday season of the year, is all about speaking from your heart and being grounded in your heart and birthing that part of you that already exists, that knows the wonder of the world, that knows the wonderfulness of the world, that knows life is expressing and expanding and evolving. So I hope this is helping you to just think about what does it mean to rebirth Christ consciousness. Um, you're birthing sweet little baby Jesus within you, and making a decision to live from a spiritually grounded place, just as Jesus is reported to have done. And Howard Thurman reminds us that this is more than just thinking about it, that when we rebirth Christ consciousness, it shows up in our actions. And so his poem, he has a set of 3 poems that I always use during Christmas and New Year's, that kind of week period. And one of them is I will light a candle. Because if you are living from Christ consciousness, you will find yourself doing these things. I will light a candle by Howard Thurman. I will light candles this Christmas, candles of joy despite all sadness, candles of hope where despair keeps watch, candles of courage for fears ever present, candles of peace for tempest-tossed days, candles of grace to ease heavy burdens, candles of love to inspire all my living, candles that will burn all the year long. Howard Thurman. That's what you're doing when you are rebirthing Christ consciousness, when you are celebrating the birth of Christ. You are lighting candles within you. You are lighting candles of joy and love and peace. You are lighting candles of courage and grace and joy. You are lighting candles for every spiritual attribute that you can think of or that you can integrate into your life, so that they are a part of your natural default way of showing up in the world. So I just want to invite you to really take up this practice for the rest of this calendar year. If you are watching this anytime in the month of December, to take up the practice of daily, say, asking yourself, if I am rebirthing Christ consciousness in me, how would that show up? If I have rebirthed Christ consciousness within me, then what would I say in this situation? Or how would I respond? And that's a little different than the saying from a few decades ago, what would Jesus do? Because it's not outside of you. It's what will you do, because the Christ consciousness is who you are and how you are in the world. So that's what I'm inviting you to think about. That's what I'm inviting you to pray about. That's what I'm inviting you to journal about. However you take it up. And you'll be joining me, because that's what I will be doing for the remainder of the month of December and probably the first 2 or 3 days of January. Rebirthing Christ consciousness within me and making my life, or designing my life around that. So I'm going to close today with these words about the Christ within. My life is hid with Christ in God. The inner person is the image and likeness of the Spirit of God. I let that inner person come forth into expression in my life. That's what will guide my feet into all truth and all wisdom. The Christ within me is free from all worry and cannot be hindered by any opposing force. My Christ within me now is perfect. My Christ is within me. We can thank Ernest Holmes for those words in self-meditation, and let's all take those words into our spiritual practice. Thanks for watching Poetry, Prayer, and Practice this week as we begin to wind down the year. And please be with me the last Tuesday of the year. I'll be visiting with Reverend Rafe Ellis, and we'll be closing out the full year of Poetry, Prayer, and Practice. Have a great week, everybody.
Thanks for watching. Join us again next week, or watch on demand at www.ntmedia.org or youtube.com/NewThoughtMedia Network. New Thought Media Network, positively inspiring. Learn more at www.ntmedia.org.
On behalf of everyone at New Thought Media Network, thank you for being a member of our virtual family. Your financial contributions help share the New Thought message with people from around the world. Please visit and contribute at www.ntmedia.org/donate. New Thought Media Network, come be you. And please like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, peace and blessings.